Out of all the budget broadcast microphones out there, dynamic microphones that are used for podcasts, that are used for vocal performances, I may have found the one that comes closest to the Shure Sm7B. Welcome back to the Rebel Tech channel. I'm Justin, and in this video we're going to be doing a comparison between the Shure Sm7B and the Presonus PD-70. A legend in the studio, a legend in broadcast, compared to a budget broadcast microphone that is essentially a newcomer in the microphone world. I mean, it just came out last year. The question that I'm going to ask you is, can you save about $400, because it's about a $500 investment here. You got $400 for the microphone and the cloud lifter or the FET head that you have to add on to it, compared to $130, so roughly about $400, give or take. Can you get the same quality, or probably a little less quality, but enough to justify just spending a quarter of the price? So, to start off, Presonus, you definitely took after the Shure Sm7B. Let's go under the hood here, and I'll show some B-roll of this. Also, to give you an example of how they sound without their wind covers on, or wind screens, pop screens, whatever you want to call them. You see here that they did exactly the same thing. Same exact 3-screw setup. It's a little bit different in like the chunkiness of the Presonus, but it's essentially the same style. I don't know of any other microphones that have this same style. And as far as the diaphragm is concerned, I mean, the diaphragm on the Shure is pretty unique to it, and the Presonus is definitely unique to its own as well. But here's the thing. With their grills, they're pretty much identical. So, obviously, with the builds, they're pretty similar. But to be honest, that's where the similarities kind of end, as far as the build is concerned. First off, XLR port external to the body on the Shure Sm7B, and the XLR cord goes into the back of the Presonus PD-70. Then you have the yoke mount, which double-sided, full support. Then you have a single support, half yoke mount on the PD-70. Does this affect the noise of handling? To be honest, if you grab the body, you're going to notice some noise. You notice a lot less on the Shure Sm7B. Like if I was to move the Shure Sm7B, and then I move the PD-70, you probably notice a lot more noise with movement. And that's fine. I mean, it makes sense because of considering the price point. I mean, you're paying for a higher quality microphone, so the low noise with movement should make sense. I mean, you're paying for that essentially. Now, finally, with the builds, aesthetically, they are fantastic. They're well built. They look great. The nice logo in the front of the Presonus. And the Shure has some writing on the bottom here. Okay, so now that we're done with the builds, we're going to get into some techie talk about the specs, tech, stuff that's in the manual. And I will put up a graphic right here so you guys can see the major ones. And then I will talk about the ones that really stand out. Both of these are actually pretty quiet microphones, at least with the numbers. I don't think the Presonus is as quiet as they say. I could be wrong, but they're saying that it's negative 56 decibels compared to the Shure Sm7B, which is negative 59. I don't find myself cranking the preamps. Obviously, I have the FET head on the Shure Sm7B, but even when I was plugging it in directly into my Zoom F6, I didn't notice myself cranking the PD-70 as much. And I've never used the FET head on the Presonus. Maybe, well, I know it will help, but does it really need it? I don't think so. And do I think that negative 56 is more closer to the 50? Not necessarily 50, but closer to 50? I think so. Now, lastly, in Techy Talk, let's get into the frequency response curve. And to start off with the lows, we obviously have a bunch of options for the Shure Sm7B, but let's start off with the natural. With the Presonus, we have a pretty nice roll off there, starting at around like, I don't know, like 70 and it starts rolling off. Not too crazy, it's a little bumpy, but it's there. It's a nice roll off. Chances are a lot of those frequencies are just going to be rumbles that you want to get out of your performance anyway. But there might be some things that you miss. I don't know. I think for the most part, most of those frequencies are going to be not usable. Then as we go to the Shure Sm7B, we have a very similar downward slope, like a shelf there, naturally. And a bump at around like 150. And then it dips back down as we go into the mids, but we'll get into the mids in a little bit. When you switch on the low cutoff, it's more drastic, starting at about 300, shelving off down to -15 and down to 50 hertz. To give you an example of that, here is the Shure Sm7B with the low cutoff on. Now that the low cutoff's on, you're probably noticing a lot of lows being cut off. I mean, there's got that shelf going on, and the bass in my voice is probably not as prominent. It's not as, I mean, my voice is not like super low, but it's certainly on the lower side, like the low mids. I always tell you guys, look at a parametric EQ and you find out where your voice lands on the frequencies. And this will help you figure out maybe what microphone you want to use. Where your voice lands can help you decide on which microphone to choose. And looking at frequency response curves certainly helps as well, because it shows where those frequencies are emphasized and taken away. All right, so regular curve now, all natural, as they say, on the Shure Sm7B. Moving on to the mids. You notice that naturally both of these microphones are pretty flat. Little bumps here and there. You got a flat section between about 150 to about 1K on the Presonus, and then it starts to rise up into your highs. The Shure Sm7B dips at about 200 and has a little bit of valley there until it gets to 700, then flattens out up till like 4.5. Then you, of course, get your presence boost after that. If I was to engage the mid boost, things change pretty significantly. All right, so the mid boost is on, and you probably noticed there's a lot more of the mids, the high mids, and the highs. They call it a mid boost because I feel that the mid boost, the mids are the most emphasized part of this, but there are some highs emphasized and some presence boosts added. For me and my voice, I don't like it too much. I like the microphone natural, as you may have seen in a bunch of videos. So this could be a person-to-person thing, a certain source, certain instruments, whatever you may put into it. You just got to play around with it and see what you like more. Now finally, the highs. As you see, the Presonus has a boost around 1K, starts going up, and little peaks and valleys, nothing too crazy, but it gets up around 0 decibels in the chart here, and then starts to dip off after 10K. It's pretty standard, a nice smooth frequency response in those highs. I really enjoy the sound of it, and especially looking at it, I like the way it looks. The Shure Sm7B naturally has a more drastic emphasis on it. You got those high boosts over 0 decibels between 4 and 6, and then it dips back down, and then you get some around 0 later on, but very tuned there. But it's not bad. It's fine. I like the way it sounds. It gives my high end of my voice a little more presence, and it's really nice naturally. Now lastly, to give you a little bit of a taste, this is with both the switches on, the low cutoff and the mid boost. To be honest, it really emphasizes a lot of those tones, and I noticed that the decibels increase significantly. Like, probably, I'm looking at the levels right now, and they probably boost up another 4, maybe even 5 decibels when the mid boost is on. So keep that in mind. Not only is it going to increase some frequencies, but it's certainly going to increase your decibel output with the microphone going into whatever interface you have. All right, so we got natural microphone and the PD-70 just doing its thing, just hanging out. What we're going to do next is 2 more things in the studio. Noise test, so we're just going to be quiet for a little bit, see how the microphones react naturally without any source coming into it, and then we'll do a rejection test. If I miss something or if I don't cover anything as far as the noise tests with the switches and stuff like that, you could check out the individual video, and I cover a lot more and you could hear those. I'm just going to stick to the regular microphone because otherwise the video will be way too long. Okay, so you may have noticed and still may notice the dog barking upstairs and maybe some people talking in the other room when I boosted it about 10 decibels, as you saw in the corner. So that could be something you got to deal with. I mean, everybody's different. Everybody's got a different scenario, different bedrooms and living rooms and everywhere you can record. I mean, it depends on where you're doing your recording. So keep these things in mind, and this is a good example of some things you may encounter. Now, the last thing we're going to do in the studio is the off-axis rejection. Like I said, we're just going to do the flat curve rejection. If you want anything else with the configurations, go check out the individual videos. I could talk. Alright, so we're going to do an off-axis rejection test. Obviously, I've been talking about 2-3 inches away from the microphones, and now we're going to just go around 90s and back 180, all that stuff. So here's going to sound close. Moving back, this is what it's going to sound like about 2 feet away from the microphones. They're set up at just about the same distance, roughly, and we got some movement upstairs, so sorry about that, but this is what it's going to sound like. We're going to go to the 90s now. Presonus side, this is what it's going to sound like on stage left with the off-axis rejection, about like a foot, maybe 1.5 feet away from the Presonus and a little bit further away to the Shure Sm7B. And this is going to be your off-axis rejection, mildly treated room, nothing crazy, but there's a lot of stuff in there, so that certainly helps with reflections. Now on the other 90 degree on stage right, the Shure Sm7B side, about 2 feet away from the Shure Sm7B, maybe a little less. And this is going to be your off-axis rejection. They're both cardioid, so keep that in mind. Some masonite on the walls, a little bit of foam, not too crazy treated, but that's what it's going to sound like. One day we will have a studio that is pretty legit. That's the goal. Build a studio that's pretty legit. The Rebel Tech studio needs a makeover one day, and once we get there, you guys will be very happy with it. Lastly, 180 degrees, about 2 feet away, from the rear of the microphones. Maybe a little more on the Presonus because it's a little shorter. Alright, so we're done with the studio here. Gonna hop in the booth, try not to sweat our you-know-what's off too much, and really figure out if these microphones would be good for you in a voiceover setting, because I really like these microphones in a voiceover setting. The Presonus is a great voiceover option. Alright, so we're in the booth now, and we have the Shure Sm7B and the PD-70. Side by side, it's amazing. I probably mentioned this before. It's amazing how close they look in detail, and obviously there are specific details that are that obviously you know which one is which, but looking at the grills and the body construction, for the most part you notice which one is which. And it's been a while since I listened to the PD-70 like consistently, especially in the booth. It's been a while since I got a good like taste of what it has to offer, and I've really missed it. I've missed this microphone because it's kind of like when you look at a raw footage of a video or a movie or something like that, not color graded, no alterations in tone of lights or anything like that. I feel like it's a blank canvas that you can mess with, and you could give it some love on the back end and make it sound like you want it to. The Shure Sm7B, it's great tone naturally is what I love about it. The dark tone. You got the light tones here, the dark tones here, which I love. I love it. But on the other side, I like the microphone naturally. You start messing with the alterations, as you may have seen in my Rode Pod mic versus the Shure Sm7B and the Shure Sm7B video. I prefer the natural tone of the microphone, flat curve and regular windscreen on it. But that's just my voice. I mean, I could probably, when I start recording people again with this microphone, I can find out what I like more. And I mentioned this before in a video. I heard a female voice, a couple of female voices on the Shure Sm7B, and they had some of those different alterations that I loved on their voice. It sounded fantastic. Some of those voices without the windscreen and a regular pop screen, they sounded awesome. It was great. You got the nice bright sounds, and it made this dark sounding microphone sound a little bit twisted. It still had that darkness, but it had the brightness like layered in there, and it's a nice, I sound like I'm a chef with some flavors and herbs and spices, so that's how I feel about it. All right, so next, before I forget, I always forget, and I end up having to come back in here. Plosive test with all the combinations. All right. Wow, they look very similar, almost like they thought of that. I'm going to make those jokes a lot. I apologize. All right, so Plosive test, Shure Sm7B. No windscreen, obviously. PD-70. A little bit better. They did a good job enforcing that diaphragm. And also, you could see the enforcement of the diaphragm in there. If you saw the montage of the Shure Sm7B, you noticed that. Shure Sm7B. Yeah, it's fine. And obviously, these are emphasized, so don't take it too seriously, but just understand how durable the diaphragm is. PD-70. That's a good windscreen. Obviously, I pull it off just a tiny bit. But just a skosh, just a little bit. And I did it on this one as well. Now the biggie. Yeah. And lastly, the SE Electronics one. I love this thing. Presonus. You maybe had a little bit more air in there, but it's not bad, not that bad. You don't have the boing or like crackling. Okay, so now time to talk into these things and talk into them with a tone in mind. We have the grills out and the SE Electronics pop filter. And this is what it's going to sound like natural. And natural, obviously, the Presonus, the only alteration I will have is the windscreen. And it might change it a little bit. I haven't noticed a really big difference. So it's not that thin. It's not that thick, I should say. It's pretty thin, but not thin enough to have a problem with plosives. So this is what it's going to sound like. Natural and natural. And I feel like the Presonus is much more, it's louder. It's got a little bit more oomph to it. But not in the sense of like decibels, because my decibels are pretty much at the same. But it's in tone, if that makes any sense. It's louder in tone. I just feel like it's just a louder tone. Maybe that's because it's brighter. I don't know. All right. Oh, yes. Oh, there it is. That sexy sound. Oh, yeah. It's all the microphone. You know when people say, like, it's in the movies that the cliche, like, oh, how does this dress look on me? And they're like, the guy's like, oh, it's just a dress. But without you, it's just a dress kind of sound. Well, with this microphone, you're just you without the microphone, but with the microphone, you know what I mean. I'm really hot and I'm losing my mind in here. I love this sound. Switching over, I can't believe I made that analogy. Now, before I die of heat exhaustion, you know how I feel about this, so let's go to the untreated room and see what you think about that. All right, so we're in our untreated room right now, and if you've been here before, you know exactly how this untreated room is. Some drywall for the walls and the ceiling. We have a TV right behind me, some glass for the windows over there, so those are some reflections. There's a wood floor, but an area rug underneath me. The room is about 10 by 10 roughly, and yeah, so what we're going to do here is we're going to do some off-axis rejection and really listen to the tones of these microphones. I'm only going to do the natural tone of this Shure Sm7B. I'm not going to do any switches on the back. If you're interested in those, the individual video, go check that out. So right now I'm about 2-3 inches away from the microphones. This is going to be a normal, everyday use of these microphones. You want to be right up on them because they're dynamic microphones, so they should be used this way. We're going to back up a little bit and do a little distance test. Now I'm about a foot away from these microphones, and you probably get a little bit more of the room, about a 10-foot ceiling, and this is what it's going to sound like in the untreated room. I say untreated because it's not like crazy good with that, but it has some reflections, but there's a lot of stuff in the room, so it could be relative to someone's bedroom or some type of other room that you can relate to. I feel like this is the untreated room, but it's more so the relatable room to you guys. Next up, 90 degrees from the PD-70, and this is going to be your off-axis rejection, about a foot and a half, 2 feet away from the PD-70, and a little bit further away from the Shure Sm7B. Now on stage right, the Shure Sm7B side, no alterations to the switches, and this is going to be your off-axis rejection, 90 degrees to the Shure Sm7B. And lastly, we have a 180 degree test, about foot and a half, 2 feet away from the rears of the microphones, and this is going to be your off-axis rejection. They're both cardioids, so they should reject this fairly well, nothing crazy, but it should be pretty good. Like I said, those reflections off the glass could be an issue, maybe some on the TV right there. The wall is a little flat over there, not much on the wall, so that could be an issue as well. Alright, so something that I want to implement because it's getting hot out, and of course I should always do this with my videos, but unfortunately the air conditioners and fans, well, air conditioners aren't always in, but fans can be used. But regardless, in these videos we're going to be doing some noise tests. So we're going to do a noise test with nothing going on, with the fan, and with the air conditioner at different levels. I'm going to put it all the way and I'm going to put it all the way down. So let's do those tests. And this is if I was to talk into it while the air conditioner is on low, and it's pretty much the same level as the fan. So this is me talking and seeing if you notice a bit of noise in the background with that. You probably will, but it's off axis to the microphone, so it shouldn't be that bad. Now I'm going to turn the air conditioner up all the way and see how it is. Alright, now that the air conditioner is on and I gave you a little test with just the air conditioner, now I'm going to talk and see the relation between my voice about 2 inches away from the microphone and the air conditioner right about like 3 feet away from here. So this is a regular room that you would probably encounter if it was a bedroom, like I said, and if your air conditioner is on. These are perfect microphones for other noise, but I have a feeling that air conditioner is probably a little much for it. But we'll know in post, and let me know down in the comments what you think. So, that was a pretty sweet comparison, and don't ask why I'm on the floor. It's not something that we need to talk about right now. Maybe in the future. So yeah, Shure Sm7B is my choice, and I really enjoy this microphone. The Presonus was a good contender for a budget broadcast microphone, but there's no comparison, at least as far as the natural quality of the microphones. Now, of course, the price is definitely a concern for some people who don't have the money to invest in a $400 or $500 microphone setup. But the Presonus, like I said, it has some wiggle room. You can manipulate it enough to make it sound the way you want. And if you're using it for streaming, I don't recommend the Shure Sm7B because it's overkill. You don't need it. The Presonus, in my mind, is the best budget broadcast microphone out there because you can manipulate it how you want and it's easier to tune the way you like. That's just my opinion. Everyone has their own. But if you're in need of a high-end microphone for a big-time production or just a podcast or something that you need good audio quality for without compromise, the Shure Sm7B is definitely an option for you as far as the dynamic microphone world is concerned. So thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed it. if you like the video, please hit the like button down below. It helps this video, helps this channel, and we are getting very close to 700 subs. So if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. We're also well on our way to getting monetized. It'd be very cool. I don't think it's going to happen before the end of the summer, but it'd be really cool if it did. But definitely by the end of the year, I'd like for it to get to that 1K mark. It'd be really cool. So share it around if you know someone who's into microphones or know someone who's into tech gear, stuff like that. I have more things in the works, some shorts, short films and YouTube shorts all together. Gonna be working on that stuff. There is one that I'm not really looking forward to editing, but it's gonna be a fun one for you guys because it's gonna torture me. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, or anything whatsoever, down in the comments section, and you could ask me while I stream on the weekends. I'm gonna get back to it hopefully next week. Gonna be back to Saturday streams, and all I ask is you be nice, be kind. You could be constructive, but don't be a dick. Basically, don't be a Richard. No offense to any Richards out there, but it just so happens that Dick and Richard are the same word or same name. If you know why that is, please just give me a reason why. And until next time, take care and stay cool. It's getting hot in these summer months. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Best part of being an adventurer is not being able to open up your effing buckets. Just committing to the bit, that's all. I put it in my chichi pocket. I put. How do I do that? How do I do the Sean Connery? I put it in my chichi pocket. I can't say pocket as Sean Connery. I put it in my chichi pocket. Good Lord, I've lost my freaking mind.